We are delighted to be with you today. We are at the site of our 2025 Economic Forum here at the Denver Art Museum. We had a fabulous presentation today from two of our key speakers. Richard Entrup from KPMG spoke in great and interesting and fascinating and scary detail about AI and the future of AI. And Kate Watkins, who's the Colorado State demographer, talked about the changing landscape of our population, and what it means for the future of our state and to all of us as businesses. We learned today that we all need to learn to pivot, and what was there in the past is not going to be there in the future. And so it's really important that we take the lessons we've learned from these two incredible speakers and adjust our topics going forward. So Kate, I'm going to start with you. And as you think about the most important takeaways from your commentary today, what would you highlight for our viewers?
Sure. I think some key themes are that we're having fewer children, fewer births, and we're getting older, which means more deaths. And the combination of those factors means a slower population growth, and that in many ways puts a bit more emphasis on net migration or immigration. Beyond that, looking at the composition of our population when it comes to age, that has a number of different impacts on our economy and beyond. And for the business community, impacts your consumers as well as your labor force. So given that we have a slowing population growth, that means more competition for labor. Given that we're aging, that means that our preferences are shifting, and the needs and the wants that we have are shifting with more and more of our population moving into a retirement age and beyond. So those are a couple, I think, of the key themes.
And if you think about this through the eye of a typical business, whether they're building homes or providing senior care or whatever, clearly there's going to be different opportunities. What I thought I heard you say today is that we will see a decline in school-age children for a while, which will impact school districts and funding. We'll see an increase in an aging population moving to Medicaid, which will be an expense for the state. But if you're a business thinking about how do you pivot your business based upon all the data that you have, are there 3 or 4 suggestions that you would have for somebody?
Yeah, I think one area where there is a tremendous amount of opportunity, and I don't think that we yet have the right infrastructure or business makings, is really serving that older adult population. We will see rapid growth in our 65 plus, but in particular our 75 to 85-year-olds over the course of just the next 10 years. And so thinking about their needs when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to additional kind of in-home care, or even thinking about estate planning, there's so much demand that we're going to see just really ballooning over the course of the
So great opportunities for people who are playing in that space.
Yes.
And maybe for people that aren't playing in that space, they need to think about it. What did you say? 230,000 people will go into that over 75 cohort?
Correct.
Which will just double down on the comments that you just
Yes,
made.
and it's truly a trend that we're seeing across the state.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So Richard, you have such an interesting perspective on things. One of the things you said today that was so interesting to me is people may be intimidated by AI, but if they don't get engaged with it, they're making a huge mistake. So can you talk a little bit about your takeaways and what advice you would have for business leaders out there about what's most important for them?
Sure, I think the opportunity applies to both organizations as well as individuals, and the ability to use this technology for doing it is what they do better and faster and more accurately. In the case of demographics that Kate has spoke to today, what dawned on me is the fact that there might be an opportunity where, as AI proliferates and becomes more pervasive within organizations, it may actually offset the risk that's coming of not having enough people to do the work that's necessary, especially in those knowledge-based jobs where AI could sit pretty nicely. I think it may actually potentially offset that risk. But as I mentioned, doing nothing at this stage with AI is not an option. I think it's akin to not having email in the 2000s or not having a website in the even later. Or it'll eventually catch up. It's still niche. Organizations are still watching what's happening. Many companies are now asking, okay, we've spent all of this money on investment and pilot programs and POCs. What are the benefits to the business? What are we getting out of this? So that's also top and center right now for a lot of our senior leadership teams and board members of our clients. What are the business benefits? Technology always should provide a real business outcome for sure.
Right. You think about so many government entities or small to mid-sized businesses that maybe don't have tech savvy today. How do they learn about how they enter this and what they need to know to become eventually effective in this?
So depending on the size of the organization, if there isn't an IT organization, technology group, there's probably individuals that fix the PCs and phones and what have you. They're going to have to rely on third parties like KPMG and others who provide these services that can help them through their journey from assessing what data they have that they can leverage all the way through building systems that conform to safety standards around trusted and responsible, as we talked about, to ensure that they can leverage their data. Because not doing so is not going to be an option for competitive advantage and for all kinds of business advantages.
You had some interesting examples today about how businesses will use that, and whether it's call centers or designing clothes by AI. You might just share some of those stories because they were so fascinating.
Sure. So in the case of consumer products and retail specifically, many of your brands are now using AI image tools to create clothing. The historic legacy creative process has been infiltrated, whereby they can now go into a room with access to a Mid-Journey or an OpenAI product, and they can vision anything and have it come to fruition as an image, and they can send that image of that product to a 3D printer and actually print a physical, tangible thing of it. And just the entire workflow of product development has been turned upside down. In the film industry, which is also being infiltrated, all of their legacy workflows from pre and post-production of making content, whether you're an ad agency making short form for your clients in ads or full production films, all of those workflows from shooting on site all the way through edit and post-production are being infiltrated for the better using AI tools right now. It's moving really fast.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? Just one more example, you talked about call centers, and today they're partially AI driven, but the future of that I think is also fascinating.
Absolutely. Every company has a point by which they touch the customer. Healthcare has patients, consumer retail has customers and clients, banking, everyone touches their customer in a certain way. Historically, the automation has been not so great with IVR solutions and phone-based systems. I think AI affords the opportunity to really get those to the point where it's as good or even better than a human on the phone.
So you think you're talking to a human, but not necessarily,
Yeah,
right?
I think it'll be indistinguishable real soon.
Yeah. Kate, one more question for you. The consequences of all this demographic change can be very significant. We talked about the state of Colorado has a $1.2 billion budget deficit that's driven by many of the things you talked about. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what some of these demographic things are doing relative to the state budget and what might adjust in the future?
Sure. A number of different kind of demographic trends are really putting quite a bit of pressure on the budget. And one of the biggest ways is through Medicaid expenditures. And so with more of the population aging into older adulthood, they're more likely to kind of deplete their incomes because of Medicaid or medical costs, and that can make them eligible for Medicaid. So expecting a fairly significant amount of growth among that demographic. The older adult and disabled populations within Medicaid are the highest expenditures, and yet kind of relative to the total population of Medicaid enrollees, kind of a smaller share. And so that's definitely going to be a trend that we see moving forward. More pressure on those expenditures. And that, given our state budget situation and Tabor, with the Tabor limit, limiting the amount of revenue that the state can bring in, the growth in Medicaid expenditures will likely come at the cost of reductions elsewhere, unless there's some kind of a shift in policy. So that's one dynamic. You'd mentioned the kind of near-term declines in school-age enrollment or school K-12 enrollment. That might put a little bit of downward pressure on near-term budget, but over the longer run, once millennials start having kids, we'll see enrollments grow a bit more. Some of them are already having kids, but we expect that to increase moving forward. The other piece here is the Tabor limit, so the amount of revenue that the state can retain and spend. One of the factors that for allowable growth is population growth. And with slowing population growth, that will put downward pressure on how much revenue the state can retain and spend. So yeah, a number of different factors.
Yeah.
And I'd say just to stretch it a little bit further, thinking about local government sources of revenue to property taxes and sales taxes being kind of the biggies. With sales tax, an aging population puts kind of downward pressure on a per capita basis when it comes to sales tax. So that's something to think about when thinking about kind of the taxability of sales tax. Older adults tend to spend more on healthcare, not necessarily as much on stuff that's actually taxable.
Yeah.
And so downward pressure there. And then when it comes to the housing market and the property tax drivers, potentially some downward pressure there, even demographically speaking, as we're coming off of a period of peak demand for housing and potentially starting to see more of a housing transition for our baby boomers.
I think the interesting message is that we think we have just a one-year, $1.2 billion budget deficit, but this is going to go on for an extended period of time based upon all the variables you talked about. And there are policy questions about maybe cutting Medicaid, but if you cut Medicaid, the unintended consequence of that could be significant relative to economics.
Yeah, it's not like the people who need those medical services go away, and they're going to be, having those. They're going to just require them no matter what, and so
You have a comment on that?
Kate and I were talking about this, having lived through this recently, personally, at the impact of Medicaid as it relates to families supporting the elderly and parents going into nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities. The bulk of people under a certain demographic are relying on Medicaid benefits to help with that.
Yeah.
So if that was to ever be withdrawn or reduced significantly, what's the alternative?
I agree. That's a scary question.
Magnitude of that's, I think, great if you analyze it.
Yeah. It's why being students of the economy, students of public policy, students of demographics, students of technology just becomes so critical for all of us, because I think the other message again today was that we all need to learn to pivot. We need to anticipate the future. We need to anticipate these new trends. And if we do that, we all have a better chance to be successful in the years ahead. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. And you added great value to our clients across the state.
My pleasure, Bruce. Great. Thank you.